My name is Gerald Vance. I am 71 years old, a retired civil engineer, and I live right here in Savannah, Georgia, the heart of the South. What I am about to tell you today is the most painful story I have ever lived through. It is a story about broken trust, a friendship betrayed, and a discovery that destroyed everything I believed to be true in my life. I spent more than 40 years living a lie. And the worst part is that I found out in the cruelest way possible, through a DNA test that revealed none of my 4 children were actually mine. All 4 had the same biological father, and that man had been my best friend since childhood. If you have ever gone through a betrayal or discovered that someone very close to you deceived you for years, leave a like for this old heart of mine. Subscribe to the channel right now so you do not miss the next stories I will tell with all my love. And tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from and what time it is there right now. Has anyone you loved ever broken your trust? I love knowing which cities you are from and what time of day you are joining me. I was born in Savannah, back when the city was still small and everyone knew one another. My father was a master mason and my mother was a seamstress. We lived in a simple house near the old Baptist church. I remember the smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the warm biscuits my mother would make, and those Sundays after church when the whole family would gather to eat the fried chicken and collard greens that only she knew how to fix. It was a simple life, but it was honest. My parents taught me that a man's word is worth more than gold, that friendship is sacred, and that family is everything. I grew up believing that with all the strength of my heart. It was while I was still a boy that I met Sterling Hightower. He lived 3 houses up from ours, in a yellow house with a big oak tree in the yard. We met playing marbles in the dirt street. I was about 8 years old. He was too. We became inseparable friends. We played football in the vacant lots, went fishing in the creek at sunset, studied together, and shared our lunches at school. Sterling was like a brother to me. When one had a problem, the other helped. When one cried, the other comforted him. I trusted him more than anyone else in the world after my parents. If someone had said that one day this man would betray me in the worst way possible, I would have laughed in their face. But life has those cruel ironies that we only understand when it is already too late. In my youth, I was a studious boy. My father always said I had a talent for construction, that I had a good eye for measurements and patience for blueprints. He wanted me to go further than he did, to reach what he could not. So I dedicated myself to my studies, passed the entrance exams, and went to study civil engineering at a university in the region. It was a source of enormous pride for my family. My father cried on the day of my graduation. He said he had fulfilled his mission on this earth. Sterling was there too, clapping for me, all proud of his friend. We stayed close, even though I had taken a different path than his. He worked at various things, mostly in sales. He never stayed long in the same place, but our friendship never changed. Or at least that was what I thought. After graduating, I started working for a construction firm. Big projects, highways, bridges, overpasses. It was a job that required me to travel quite a bit. Sometimes I would stay away for 20 days. I would come back for only about 10 days, and then have to leave again. But the money was good, and I had plans. I wanted to build a good life, a solid family, and provide comfort for my future children. I was young, full of dreams, and full of the desire to succeed in life. And it was precisely at that time that Sterling showed up with news that would change everything. One day, he called me to grab a beer at Old Man Joe's Tavern near the town square. It seemed strange to me because he had a different kind of smile, looking a bit nervous. We sat down, ordered 2 ice-cold beers, and he beat around the bush until he finally let it out. He said he had met a very beautiful girl, a cousin of an acquaintance of his, and he thought I would like to meet her too. Her name was Sonia. I had no idea that that moment there, at that simple tavern table, with the smell of fried catfish and the sound of people playing dominoes in the background, was the beginning of a trap that would last more than 40 years. But at that moment, naive as I was, I could only think that my best friend was being a good pal, wanting to help me find someone special. And when I met Sonia the following week, I was completely enchanted. She was beautiful, delicate, and had a sweet way of speaking that won me over in our very first conversation. What I did not know was that she and Sterling had a history that I would only discover decades later, when it would already be too late to fix the damage. Sonia was one of those women who, when she enters a room, everyone turns to look. It was not just her beauty, it was her way of being. She had a smile that lit up everything, a soft voice, and that warm southern way about her. Polite, attentive, the kind who asks if you want more sweet tea before you even have to ask. When Sterling introduced her to me that Sunday afternoon at the church social, I felt my heart skip a beat. She was wearing a floral dress, her hair pinned back with a clip, and when she greeted me, I caught the scent of her soft perfume. It was love at first sight, the kind you think only exists in movies. We started dating, and everything moved very fast. She said I was different from the other guys, that I had a future ahead of me, and that she admired my dedication to my work. I felt like the luckiest man in the world. I would take her for walks in the park. We ate ice cream at the local parlor. We went to the cinema to see those romantic movies she liked. On Sundays after church, we would sit and talk on the park bench, planning the future. She spoke about the children she wanted to have, the house she wanted to build, and I promised her I would give her all of that. And I kept that promise. My God, how I kept it. I worked like a dog all my life to provide comfort for her and the kids. But while I was building bridges and highways, another man was building a family with my wife under my own roof. Sterling was always around. At first I found that natural. After all, he was my best friend, and he had been the one to introduce me to Sonia. When we went out, sometimes he came along too. When I invited Sonia to eat at my mother's house on Sunday, Sterling would show up there as well. My mother made that delicious soul food: smothered chicken, red rice, baked beans, fresh cornbread, and we would stay there at the big table laughing, talking, and making plans. Sterling would joke, saying that when I got married, he was going to be the best man. And he was. But his role in Sonia's life went far beyond being the best man at the wedding. There is one thing I remember to this day that should have made me suspicious. But I was so foolish, so trusting. One day, I went to Sonia's house to pick her up for a town festival, and Sterling was there. They were sitting on the porch talking quietly. And when I arrived, they both jumped, as if they had been caught doing something wrong. Sterling quickly made up an excuse. He said he had stopped by to leave me a message, not knowing I was already on my way. Sonia smiled and said she had offered him some coffee while he waited. I believed them. Of course I believed them. Why would I doubt my best friend and the woman I loved? We got married a few months after we started dating. It was a simple, but beautiful ceremony at the church, with the whole family present. My mother cried with emotion. My father gave me a tight hug and said I had chosen a good woman. Sterling was my best man, just as he had promised. At the reception, there was sweet potato pie made by Aunt Ruth, plenty of food, and we danced until late. I looked at Sonia in that simple wedding dress and felt like the happiest man in the world. I thought I had found the woman of my life, the mother of my children, my partner forever. I did not know I was marrying a woman who already belonged to another, that her heart already had an owner, and that owner was my best friend. Shortly after the wedding, I had to travel for a big project that was going to last almost a month. I remember worrying about leaving Sonia alone so soon. We had just gotten married, but she took my hands, looked into my eyes with that sweet way of hers, and told me to be at peace, that she knew I had to work, and she understood. She said she would be fine, that her family lived nearby, and that she wouldn't lack for anything. And that was when Sterling offered to help. He said he could stop by the house every now and then to see if everything was okay, if Sonia needed anything. I thanked him, deeply moved. What luck I had to have a friend like that, I thought. A friend who looked after my wife while I was away working. I was so naive, it hurts to think about it today. When I returned from my trips, the house was always tidy. Sonia always had that smile on her face and warm food on the table. She made fried chicken that was a delight, and slow-cooked greens that melted in your mouth. There was always that fresh pot of coffee waiting for me. I felt welcomed, loved. I never suspected a thing. Sterling would stop by to have a beer with me. He would tell me the news from around town. We played dominoes on the porch. Everything seemed perfect. I had a beautiful wife, a happy marriage, a job that paid well, and a best friend who was always there. How blind I was. It didn't take long for Sonia to get pregnant with our first child. I was over the moon with the joy of becoming a father. My dream of having a large, united family was coming true. During the pregnancy, I tried to travel less, but it couldn't be avoided completely. The work demanded it. And every time I had to leave, Sterling was right there, ready to help. He took Sonia to her prenatal appointments when I couldn't. He did the grocery shopping for her, fixed things that broke around the house. I thanked God for putting such a helpful friend in my life. It never crossed my mind that he was doing all that, because the child growing in my wife's womb was his. It was his blood. And I, the fool, was paying all the bills, preparing the baby's nursery, buying diapers and clothes. When Franklin was born, it was one of the happiest days of my life. I held that little baby in my arms, looked at that tiny face, and promised I was going to be the best father in the world, that I would work hard to give him everything good, education, comfort, love, and I kept that promise. But there is one thing that eats at me to this day. Sterling was one of the first to visit us at the hospital. He arrived with flowers and a gift for the baby, all smiles. And when he held Franklin in his arms, I saw a different emotion in his gaze, an emotion too strong to be just from a godfather. But I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. The years went by, and I continued to travel a lot for work. 20 days away, 10 at home, sometimes even longer periods apart. I called Sonia every day. I asked how she was, how Franklin was doing. She always said everything was fine, that Sterling had helped with this or that he was such a sweet person. And I agreed, proud of my friend. I sent money, paid all the bills on time, and worked myself to the bone so that nothing would be lacking at home. Meanwhile, Sterling had what I wanted most, time with my family, time in my house, time in my bed. A few years later came the second son, Maurice. The same joy, the same emotion, the same promise to be a good father, and again, Sterling was always present, always helpful. Then came Ruthie, my only girl, the little princess I wanted so much. And finally, Vincent, the youngest. 4 beautiful children I loved more than my own life. I worked like a madman to give them everything. I paid for good schools, nice clothes, medicine when they got sick, trips, everything. I was a present father when I was at home, even though I was tired from the travels. I played with them, helped with their homework, took them to the park. But there was one thing that always bothered me deep down, a small thing I tried to ignore. None of my 4 children looked like me. I would say that to Sonia sometimes, half joking, half serious. I said it was curious how none of them had my nose, my eyes, or my way of being. She would laugh and say they had taken after her and her family. I accepted the explanation because I wanted to believe, because it hurts less to believe a comfortable lie than to face a truth that destroys everything. But deep down, in the corner of my soul, a little voice whispered that something was wrong. I silenced that voice for more than 40 years. And Sterling stayed close, always available, always helping. He knew my children better than I did because he was there when I wasn't. He saw the first steps, heard the first words, participated in the day-to-day. How proud I was. I was grateful for the luck of having such a dedicated friend. It never occurred to me that he wasn't just being a friend. He was being a father, the father of the children I believed were mine. The years kept passing, and my 4 children grew up. Franklin was the most serious one. He always had been. Since he was little, he had a responsible way about him. He looked after his younger siblings whenever his mother asked. Maurice was the joker. He lived for pranks, making everyone laugh. Ruthie was my little princess, delicate, affectionate, always sticking close to her mother. And Vincent, the youngest, was the smartest of them all. He made us so proud at school with his good grades. I looked at the 4 of them, and my chest filled with happiness. I believed I had managed to build exactly what I had always dreamed of, a beautiful, united family, full of love. But there was a detail that bothered me more and more, even though I tried to sweep that discomfort under the rug. As the boys grew older, I realized that none of them had anything of me, nothing. Franklin had a different way of walking than mine, a different smile. Even his voice turned out different. Maurice was already taller than me in his teens. He had broad shoulders that didn't come from my family. Ruthie had those eyes that weren't mine or Sonia's. At least that was what I thought. And Vincent had a way of gesturing with his hands that I had never seen in anyone in my family. Or Sonia's family. One time, I was on the porch with my father, who was already getting old, having a little bourbon that he liked after Sunday dinner. He sat there, watching the boys playing in the yard, and let out a sentence that kept hammering in my head. "It's curious, Gerald. Your boys don't look anything like you, do they? Not the nose, not the way of being. They all took after their mother." I laughed awkwardly and agreed. But that hurt. My own father had noticed it. And if he had noticed, Was it possible that other people noticed it too? Was there gossip going on behind my back? But I pushed those thoughts far away. After all, I loved my children with all my heart. They were my life, my reason for working hard, for enduring those long trips that kept me away from home. I would arrive from the construction sites exhausted, my body aching, but it was enough to see their faces running to hug me for all the pain to go away. They called me Dad, gave me goodnight kisses, asked for my advice, and that was all that mattered, right? Or at least, that was what I tried to convince myself of. Sterling remained a constant presence in our lives. He participated in everything. Birthdays for the kids. There went Sterling with gifts and everything. Holiday parties? Sterling and his wife, Mrs. Halloway, always came. Football games for the boys at school. When I couldn't go because of a trip, Sterling went. Ruthie's school play? Sterling was there, recording it with that old camera of his. He was present in all the important moments where a father should be. And I, the fool, thought that was beautiful. I believed I had a brother friend who loved my children as if they were his own. And they were. I just didn't know it. There was a time when Franklin, already a young man, came home with a bad report card from school. He had gotten a low grade in math. I sat down with him to talk, to give him that fatherly lecture, but in a way that wouldn't discourage the boy. I was explaining the importance of studies when Sterling arrived, as he always did. He heard the conversation and jumped in. He said he could help Franklin with his homework, that he had a way of teaching. I thanked him, relieved. It didn't cross my mind that this wasn't normal. What friend wastes time teaching homework to someone else's son unless he isn't someone else's son? Mrs. Halloway, Sterling's wife, was a quiet woman, the kind who spoke little, but observed everything. She was always a bit cold with me, never one for conversation. I thought it was just her way of being, a bit shy. But today I understand that she knew. She knew what her husband was doing while I was away. She knew that the children I was raising were her husband's, and she swallowed that in silence for decades, carrying a pain that I can't even imagine. Once, at a birthday party for Maurice, I saw a scene that should have made me suspicious. Mrs. Halloway was looking at Sterling while he was playing with the kids in the yard. Her look was one of such profound sadness that it squeezed my heart. Her ways were watery, but she didn't cry. When I approached her to ask if she was okay, she cleared her throat and said it was just tiredness. Nothing serious, but it wasn't tiredness. It was the weight of a secret that was destroying her from the inside. It was the pain of knowing her husband had a parallel family, even if it was within the legality of my marriage. The years kept passing, and I kept working like a dog. I managed to grow in my profession. I started earning better. I took on larger projects. I built a good house for my family with 4 bedrooms, a large living room, and a spacious backyard. I put the boys in private school, the best in the city. I bought a better car. I gave my children everything they asked for, within reason. I wanted them to have opportunities I didn't have, to study, to be someone in life. And they were good kids. They didn't give me trouble. They studied, helped at home, and were polite. I felt like a fulfilled father. But there is one thing I will never forget. Vincent, when he was small, he must have been 6 or 7 years old, once looked at Sterling and blurted out of nowhere, Uncle Sterling, you look like us. Did you know that? Everyone turned a bit uncomfortable. Sonia quickly changed the subject, offered cake, and called everyone to the table. I laughed nervously and didn't give it any importance, but that sentence kept echoing in my head for days. The child had seen what I didn't want to see. He had noticed a resemblance that I refused to acknowledge. Another time, Ruthie came home from school upset. The girls at school had teased her, saying she didn't look like me. She came crying to my lap, asking if she was adopted. My heart tightened. I held her in my lap, dried her tears, and told her that she was my daughter. Yes, that I had seen her be born, that I had cut the umbilical cord, that she was my princess. She calmed down and never brought up the subject again. But I kept thinking about that. The kids at school had noticed. Everyone saw it except me, the one who should have been most interested in seeing. Sterling even had a key to my house. I gave it to him myself, thinking I was doing a favor, making it easier for him to help Sonia while I was traveling. He would arrive at any hour, walk in as if he were part of the family, because, for all intents and purposes, he was more a part of the family than I was. He knew where everything was in my house. He knew the favorite dish of each of my children. He knew the schedules, the commitments, the habits. He lived there, and I was paying the bills, happy as can be, believing I had a dedicated wife and a loyal friend. There was a period when I tried to travel less and stay home more. I had taken on some projects here in the region. I managed to return every day to sleep. And I noticed something strange. Sterling began to disappear little by little. He showed up less and made more excuses not to come by the house. I even commented on it to Sonia. It seemed strange to me. She said he must be busy with his own things, that it was normal. But it wasn't normal. What was normal was that when I was at home, he had no space to continue the charade. He couldn't come in and play the part of the man of the house, the father of my children, the husband of my wife. So he stayed away, waiting for me to travel again. And I traveled. I always traveled. It was my job. It was what gave me the money to support that beautiful family I thought I had. Every time I got into the car to go to another job site, I looked back and saw Sonia waving from the window. The boys were saying goodbye, and my heart would ache. But I consoled myself thinking it was for them that I was doing this, for them that I sacrificed myself. I didn't know that every time I left, it was as if I myself were opening the door for Sterling to enter and take my place. It was as if I were handing my family over to his hands. There was one night, I remember it as if it were today, that I woke up at midnight on one of those work trips. I was in a cheap roadside hotel, the kind you stay in when you're working far from home. I woke up with an anguish in my chest, a bad feeling I couldn't explain. I called home, even though it was late. Sonia answered, sounding sleepy. She said everything was fine, to be at peace. But I heard a noise in the background, like there was someone else there. I asked what it was. She said it was the television she had forgotten to turn off. I believed her. But today I wonder, was it the television or was it Sterling, slipping out the back door? My children grew up beautiful, healthy, and intelligent. Franklin graduated and got a good job. Maurice did too. Ruthie married a decent young man. She gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren. Vincent was finishing university. I looked at all of that and thought I had done my part as a father, that I had fulfilled my mission, that I had given love, education, and structure. They called me Dad with affection. They respected me. They came to me for advice. But none of them had my blood in their veins. None had my DNA. They were all children of the man I called my brother. And life went on in a routine that seemed perfect on the outside, but inside was a lie built over decades. Sonia and Sterling were living this strange dance where I was the only one who didn't know the steps. Until one day, destiny decided to reveal the truth in the worst way possible. And when the truth appeared, it didn't come alone. It came with a pain so great, it made me question everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. When I retired, I thought I would finally be able to enjoy life at home, enjoy the family, and see the grandchildren grow up. I had worked my whole life, spent years and years traveling, sleeping in cheap hotels, eating roadside diner food, far from everything I loved. Now was my time to rest, to be close to my own, to make the most of every moment. But do you know what happened? The more time I spent at home, the more I noticed things that had previously gone unnoticed. Small details that started coming together like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Sterling had become more distant after I retired. It wasn't an abrupt distance. It was a subtle thing, but I noticed. He who used to show up almost every day began to come only once in a while, always with some excuse. That he was busy, that he had a commitment, that he didn't feel well. Sonia also became different, more nervous, more withdrawn. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with a strange expression, as if she had something weighing on her conscience. When I asked if everything was okay, she would give that forced little smile and say yes. It was just tiredness. One afternoon, I was organizing some old papers in the closet. Old documents, photos, the kind of things you keep for years without even looking at them. And I found an old photo, faded, from when Sonia was younger. She was smiling, beautiful as always. But there was one thing in that photo that caught my attention. She was wearing a necklace I had never seen, a simple necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. I showed her the photo and asked about the necklace. She lost her color, stammered something about it being a gift from a friend, and quickly changed the subject. But I saw the nervousness in her eyes, and that left me uneasy. I started paying attention to other things too, small things that alone meant nothing, but together formed a strange picture. Sometimes I would come home, and there was a different smell in the living room, as if someone had been there smoking. But neither I nor Sonia smoked. When I asked, she said, "It must be from the street, from the neighbor." Once I found an ashtray with a cigarette butt on the back porch. I never smoked. Sonia never smoked. But Sterling smoked. He always smoked those cheap, filtered cigarettes. The children also started leaving me with a nagging doubt. It wasn't anything they did on purpose, but they were random comments. Things they said without realizing the importance. Maurice once mentioned that Uncle Sterling had taken him fishing when he was a kid, on a weekend when I was traveling. But the way he told it was as if it were a very special, very intimate memory. He spoke about the advice Sterling had given him that day about how to be a man, about life. That hurt me because Sterling was giving fatherly advice to my son. Ruthie also let slip once, by accident, that when she was a teenager and had fought with me over a boyfriend, she had gone to cry to Uncle Sterling, that he had talked to her, calmed her down, and given her advice. I kept turning that over in my head for days. Why did my daughter seek out Sterling to vent instead of her mother, or waiting for me to return from my trip? What was the connection she felt with him that made her trust him so much? Franklin had a way of turning his head when he was thinking. That reminded me of someone, but I couldn't identify who. Until one day, Sterling came to the house, sat on the porch with me for a beer, and made exactly the same movement. He turned his head to the side with that thoughtful expression, and it was as if a light had switched on in my brain. Franklin made that identical gesture. And it wasn't just Franklin. Maurice had a way of furrowing his brow that was identical to Sterling's. Ruthie had that same half smirk, and Vincent gestured with his hands the same way Sterling did when he spoke excitedly. I started to become obsessed with these resemblances. I spent hours on the porch drinking my coffee, watching my children when they came to visit, trying to find something of myself in them. Some feature, some gesture, some characteristic that said, "This is Gerald's son." But I found nothing. Nothing. It was as if I were a stranger who had raised someone else's children. And the worst part is that I saw that someone else every week. I sat at the same table, shared a beer, and called him friend. One night I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning in bed, with my head burning with thoughts I didn't want to think. Sonia was sleeping beside me with that soft breathing. I looked at her and wondered, do I really know this woman? Were these years of marriage real? Or was it all a lie? I got up, went to the living room, sat on the sofa in the dark, and for the first time in my life, I let doubt truly enter my heart. Were my children really mine? But I was afraid of the answer, very afraid. Because if the answer was no, everything I had built would crumble. My whole life, all my certainties, everything would go down the drain. So I pushed those thoughts far away. I tried to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that it was all in my head. After all, why would Sonia do that to me? Why would Sterling, my childhood friend, my brother at heart, betray me in that way? But the suspicions didn't go away. They stayed there, circling my mind, like vultures over a carcass. And the more I tried to ignore them, the more they grew. I started paying attention to everything. To the way Sonia looked at Sterling when he came to the house, to the way he spoke to her, an intimacy that went beyond friendship, to the way my children related to him, with an affection that seemed too deep to be just from godsons to a godfather. There was a Sunday when we had a family dinner at home. Everyone was there. Me, Sonia, the 4 children, the sons-in-law and daughter-in-law, the grandchildren, and of course, Sterling and Mrs. Halloway. We were there at the big table eating that meal Sonia had prepared. Fried chicken, red rice, slow-cooked beans, cornbread, everything very tasty, everyone talking and laughing. And I just stayed there, observing how Sterling looked at my children, how he smiled when they told a story, how he stepped into the conversations, giving opinions and advice, as if he had the right. And Mrs. Halloway was there quietly, as always, eating in silence. At one point, our eyes met, and I saw in her eyes a sadness so great, so deep, that it made me cold. It was as if she were telling me something without words, as if she knew something terrible and wanted to warn me, but couldn't. I tried to decipher that look, but she lowered her head and kept eating, and the moment passed. But that image remained etched in my memory. After that meal, I started avoiding Sterling. I made up excuses when he called to meet up. I said I was busy, that I didn't feel well, that I had a commitment. He found it strange, because we had never been that way. But I could no longer look at him without feeling that bad thing in my chest. That gnawing doubt, that feeling that they had been making a fool out of me for decades. Sonia noticed that I was different. She asked several times what was going on, if I was sick, if there was something worrying me. I said no, that everything was fine, that it was just the tiredness of age. But she insisted, saying she knew me, that she knew when I was hiding something. And I almost told her. I almost let it all out. The suspicions, the fears, the doubts. But I froze in the moment, because verbalizing that meant making it real. And I still had the hope that it was all just my paranoia. The months went by and I withdrew more and more. Now I spent my time just sitting on the porch, staring at nothing, thinking about life, thinking about the choices I had made. Had I been such a bad husband? Did Sonia have any reason to betray me? I was always hardworking. I always brought money home. I never raised a hand against her. I never lacked respect. What had been missing? Why did she need another man? And Sterling, my brother, my childhood friend, the guy I trusted more than myself. How did he have the courage to look me in the face all those years, sit at my table, eat my food, drink my beer while stabbing me in the back? What kind of man does that to his best friend? I was becoming bitter, cranky. The children noticed and were worried. They came to visit me, and I was always serious, always with that black cloud over my head. They asked if I was okay, and I lied. I said yes, but I wasn't. I was being consumed from the inside, eaten away by doubt and resentment. And the worst part is that I didn't have the courage to seek the truth, because deep down, very deep down, I already knew what it was. That was when destiny decided to give me a push. Vincent, my youngest, started feeling unwell. Excessive tiredness, swelling in his legs, high blood pressure. We took him to the doctor, and after some tests, the diagnosis came: a serious kidney problem. He was going to need a transplant. My world collapsed. My youngest son, still so young, needing a kidney. The whole family mobilized to do compatibility tests. Me, Sonia, the siblings, everyone wanting to help, wanting to save Vincent. That was when everything started to truly fall apart. Because those tests we did to see if we were compatible to donate a kidney ended up revealing something much bigger. Something that was going to destroy not just me, but the entire structure of our family. And when that phone rang with the lab on the other side of the line, I still had no idea that my entire life was about to change in a matter of seconds. The days that followed after we did the tests to try to donate a kidney to Vincent were the most agonizing of my life. It wasn't just the worry about my son's health, which already broke my heart. It was something more, a bad feeling I couldn't explain. It was as if I had asked destiny to confirm what I had been suspecting for so long, but didn't have the courage to face. Every time the phone rang, my heart raced. I would stare at the device, afraid to answer, and hear something that would change everything. Sonia was also strange, stranger than normal. She, who had always been one for talking, for filling the house with that soft voice of hers, was too quiet. She lived shut up in the bedroom, or sitting in the kitchen staring at the wall, as if she had 1,000 thoughts passing through her head. When I asked if she was okay, if she was worried about Vincent, she would give a deep sigh and say yes. It was just that, the worry about the boy. But I saw that there was something more. There was a fear in her eyes that went beyond a mother's worry. Sterling disappeared. He simply disappeared. Since we had done the tests, He gave no more signs. He didn't call, didn't send a message, didn't show up at the house as he always did. I even commented on it to Sonia. It seemed very strange to me. Sterling, who was always so present, so concerned about the family, suddenly disappears exactly when Vincent was in need. She shrugged her shoulders and said he must be busy, that he had mentioned he was going to travel to settle some things. But that didn't convince me. Sterling running away, exactly when we had done a blood test? That was no coincidence. There was a night when I couldn't sleep a wink. I kept tossing and turning in bed, staring at the ceiling, with those thoughts hammering at my head. What if the result of the test showed that I wasn't compatible with Vincent? Not because the kidneys simply weren't similar, but for a bigger reason. What if it showed I wasn't his father? But at the same time, a part of me tried to cling to the hope that I was exaggerating, that my head was creating things that didn't exist. After all, I had seen the four of them be born. I had held each one of them in my arms while still in the maternity ward. I had cut the umbilical cord for Franklin and Maurice. How could I not be the father? The next day, Sonia was even more nervous. She spilled the coffee at breakfast, something that never happened. She, who was always so careful, so precise with household things, was pacing from one side to the other without getting anything done. She would grab one thing, put it down, grab another. I sat her in a chair and took her hands. I asked what was happening, why she was like this. She looked at me with those eyes full of tears and said she was afraid of losing Vincent, that she wouldn't be able to take it if something happened to the boy. I hugged her and told her everything was going to be fine, that God was going to help us. But inside, I had a horrible feeling that something much worse than Vincent's illness was about to be revealed. The other children were also apprehensive. Franklin called every day asking if the result had come out. Maurice stopped by the house about 3 days in a row just to see if there was news. Ruthie came over with the grandchildren, thinking it would distract me, cheer me up. Everyone was united, everyone, wanting to help their younger brother. I looked at the four of them, at my 4 beautiful children, and thought, am I going to lose them? Is it possible that when the truth comes to light, they will hate me for some reason I don't even know yet? Nearly 2 weeks passed before the phone finally rang. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember it well because it was the day I always went for my walk in the park. I had just returned. I was taking off my sneakers on the porch when I heard the phone ring inside. Sonia answered. I heard her say, "Hello," with a trembling voice. Then she went quiet. I only heard her saying, "Yes, I understand." Okay. When she hung up, she came to the porch. She was white, with no color at all in her face. She said it was from the lab, that they wanted to talk to me, that it was about the results of the tests. They asked that I go there in person, that they needed to talk. My world stopped at that moment. Why did they want me to go there? A compatibility test isn't something they can't say over the phone. Unless there was something wrong, very wrong. I looked at Sonia and saw the panic stamped on her face. She knew. In that moment, I was certain. She knew what that test was going to reveal, and she was terrified. I went to the lab early the next morning. I didn't even sleep well that night. Sonia offered to go with me, but I told her no. I would go alone. I don't know why, but I felt I needed to face this alone. The lab was right there, near downtown. In an old building. I walked up the stairs slowly, feeling my legs are heavy at every step. I reached the reception and announced myself. The girl looked at me with an expression of pity and asked me to wait a few minutes. I sat in those plastic chairs in the waiting room, my hands sweating cold. There were other people there waiting to do tests, collect results, that sort of thing. Everyone in their own world, minding their own lives. No one had any idea of the storm that was about to fall on me. I kept staring at the old magazines on the table, the pictures on the wall, the clock that seemed to move slower than normal. Every second was an eternity. After about 15 minutes that seemed like hours, a door opened and a doctor appeared. A middle-aged man in a white coat, with a folder in his hand and an expression that was far too serious. He called my name and asked me to enter his office. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it was going to come out of my mouth. I entered that small office with a desk, 2 chairs, an old computer, and some diplomas on the wall. The doctor closed the door behind me and asked me to sit down. He pulled up his chair, put the folder on the desk, and stared at me for a few seconds. Then he gave a deep sigh, the way someone does when they have to give bad news and doesn't know where to start. He opened the folder, looked at the papers, then looked at me again, and finally spoke in a low, serious voice. "Mr. Vance, I need to speak with you about the results of the tests. It's a delicate situation." My mouth went dry. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I nodded my head, authorizing him to continue. He took another deep breath and let it out. "You did the compatibility test to donate a kidney to Vincent, correct?" I nodded again. He continued. "Well, during the analysis process, we also perform relationship verification. It's protocol, and I'm sorry to inform you, but the test showed that you are not the biological father of Vincent." The world collapsed. It simply collapsed. I had imagined it. I had suspected it. But hearing that said out loud in plain English by a doctor looking at a scientific paper was like receiving a punch to the stomach. I ran out of air. I gripped the arms of the chair tightly so as not to fall. The doctor stared at me with pity, waiting for me to process the information. After a few seconds that felt like a lifetime, I managed to release the words that had formed in my mind. "And the other 3? My other 3 children, doctor, is it possible? Are they mine?" My voice came out trembling, broken. The doctor looked at me with an even more serious expression and replied, "Mr. Vance, we have in our system the data from all the tests that were performed recently for the donation. Your other 3 children also participated in the tests, and I verified them. I can confirm the data if you wish." I nodded my head, even though I knew I didn't want to hear what was coming. But I needed to know. After so many years of suspicion, doubt, and anguish, I needed the truth, however painful it might be. The doctor opened another page in the folder and read out loud, each word falling like a hammer blow on my chest. "Franklin, Maurice, Ruthie, and Vincent. None of them are your biological children. None. None of the 4. I had imagined that maybe Vincent wasn't mine. Maybe one of them. But the 4 of them. The 4 children I had raised, whom I had loved, for whom I had worked my entire life to support. None of them were mine. It was impossible. It was madness." But the doctor continued, and what came next was even worse. "And there is something more, Mr. Vance. From the DNA test, all 4 have the same biological father. It is the same man. A man who had a relationship with your wife during all those years and fathered the 4 children. 40 years. More than 40 years of marriage. 4 children. And they were all from another man. from the same man. I was not the father of any of them, and someone, one single man, was the father of all of them. For decades, while I worked like a dog, traveled, and killed myself to support my family, that man was there fathering children with my wife. One child, then another, and another one more, 4 times. And I was raising them all without knowing anything. I managed to ask, my voice coming out almost in a whisper, "Is it possible to know who the father is?" The doctor shook his head and explained, "The DNA test doesn't identify the person by name, only by genetic compatibility. But if you have a suspicion of someone, if you can bring a blood sample or genetic material from that person, we can make the comparison and confirm." And it was in that moment that everything clicked in my head. All the pieces of the puzzle came together at once. Sterling always present, Sterling with a key to my house, Sterling taking care of my children when I traveled, Sterling disappearing just now. The resemblances I had noticed, the way my children looked like him and not me, it all made sense now. A horrible, painful sense, but one that explained absolutely everything. I looked at the doctor and said with a certainty that came from the depths of my soul, "I know who the father is. I know exactly who it is, and I'm going to prove it." I walked out of the lab, moving like a zombie. My legs were shaking, my head was spinning, and my heart felt like it was going to explode inside my chest. I got into the car and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. 44 years of betrayal. Because if Franklin had been born at the beginning of the marriage, it meant the affair had already existed before. Maybe it had always been there. Maybe Sonia was never truly mine. But I needed proof. I needed to confirm it was Sterling. It wasn't that I had any doubt, but I needed to see it in writing. I needed the scientific paper saying that my best friend, my brother, had stabbed me in the back for more than 4 decades. I called Sterling. He answered, sounding surprised since I had been keeping my distance. I made my voice as firm as I could and said, "Friend, we're getting old, aren't we? How about we go for a full checkup, blood work, all that? Let's take care of our health." He hesitated for a few seconds but agreed. I scheduled it for the next day. The night at home was hell. Sonia asked what the doctor had said. I told her it would take a few more days for the full result to come out, that the lab was verifying some things. She stared at me with those eyes full of fear, as if she knew the whole charade was about to collapse. We ate dinner in silence. I couldn't look at her. Every time I saw her face, I saw the lie. 44 years of a lie. The next day, I took Sterling to the lab. He was still a bit suspicious, but I made up a story that my doctor had recommended it, that it was a preventive thing, that men our age had to take care of themselves. He did the blood test. I said I would pick up the result later and bring it to him. He agreed and left. As soon as he left, I explained the situation to the doctor. I asked them to compare Sterling's DNA with that of my 4 children. 3 days later, the phone rang. "Mr. Vance, we have confirmed it. Mr. Sterling Hightower is the biological father of all 4. Franklin, Maurice, Ruthie, and Vincent. All 4 are his children. There is no margin of error. The compatibility is 99.9%. I hung up the phone and cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my father died. I cried out of rage, pain, and humiliation. 44 years of being made an idiot. 44 years of paying the bills for 4 children who weren't mine, while the real father had the luxury of only showing up to play, to give advice, to be the cool uncle. I was the bank, the fool who worked like a dog, while the other man slept with my wife and raised his family in my house. I called Sterling. I said I needed to talk to him urgently. He came. We sat on the porch, in the same spot where we had shared beers so many times. But this time, there was no beer. There was no friendship. There was only the truth. I looked him in the eyes and let it out. I know everything, Sterling. I know you are the father of my 4 children. I did the DNA test. It's all proven. He turned white. He tried to deny it. Gerald, what madness is this? What are you talking about? I threw the lab papers in his face. It's right here, in black and white. Franklin, Maurice, Ruthie, Vincent, and all yours. None mine. 99.9% certainty. You are their father, Sterling. He collapsed. He literally collapsed. His hands started shaking. His whole body. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. He just sat there, staring at the papers in shock. I continued, my voice full of hatred. How long, Sterling? How long have you been sleeping with my wife? How long have you been making a fool out of me? He swallowed hard and whispered, almost without a voice, Since before you 2 got married. I stood up from the chair with the urge to tear him in 2. Before? You were with her before, and yet you introduced her to me? You 2 planned this. He raised his hands, trembling. It wasn't like that, Gerald. Let me explain. I met her first. We dated. But I was poor. I had nothing to offer. You were an engineer. You had a future. She chose you for the money. But we never stopped seeing each other. 44 years. 44 years. You 2, deceiving me. And the children. The 4 children. You watched me raise your children. And you never felt shame. He started to cry. I loved her, Gerald. I always loved her. And I loved the boys. But they were yours too. You were their father for real. You were the one who raised them. You were the one who gave everything. I gave everything because I believed they were mine. I worked like a dog. I spent years away from home traveling, sleeping in ugly hotels, eating bad food, all for my children. And you, lowlife, you stayed here in my house, in my bed, with my wife, making child after child. I told him to get out, that if he didn't get out of my sight, I wouldn't be responsible for what I might do. He ran out, crying, destroyed. But his pain was nothing compared to mine. I went into the house. Sonia was in the kitchen cooking. When she saw me, she turned pale. I told her to sit down. She tried to ask what had happened, but I cut her off. I know everything, Sonia. About Sterling. About the children. All of it. She collapsed. She fell to her knees on the kitchen floor crying, screaming. Forgive me, Gerald. Forgive me. I didn't want to. I loved both of you. I couldn't choose. You couldn't choose? Yes, you chose. You chose my money and his body. You used me as a bank for 44 years while you had your fun with my best friend. She tried to explain herself. She said she had been weak, that she had made a mistake, that she loved me for real. But I didn't want to hear it. I showed her the DNA tests. The 4 of them, Sonia. All 4 are his. I am the father of none of them. None. And you let me raise them. You let me kill myself working. You let me believe I had a family, when in reality, I only had a lie. She begged for forgiveness. But there was no forgiveness for that. There was no way to forgive 44 years of betrayal. I grabbed my things and left the house. I was not going to sleep one more night under that roof of lies. But the worst part was still to come. Telling the children. My children, who weren't mine, but whom I loved as if they were. Now, I had to destroy their world too. I called the 4 children for a meeting. I said it was urgent, that I needed to talk to them together. They all came, worried, thinking it was about Vincent, about the transplant. They sat in the living room and waited for me. I looked at each one of them, at Franklin, my firstborn, at Maurice, the joker, at Ruthie, my princess, at Vincent, the youngest, my children. At least, that was how I saw them. I was going to have to destroy that vision forever. I took a deep breath and began. You all did the DNA test to try to donate a kidney to Vincent. The result came out, and it showed something. Something you need to know. They grew tense. Franklin asked if Vincent was worse. I shook my head. It's not about his illness. It's about parentage. I handed the lab papers to Franklin. He read them, looked confused, and passed them to the others. One by one, they read, trying to understand, until it clicked. Maurice was the first to speak, his voice trembling. What does this mean, Dad? It means I am not the biological father of you all. None of you. All 4 are the children of another man, and that man is Sterling. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Ruthie started to cry softly. Vincent turned white and ran to the bathroom. I heard him retching. Franklin and Morris just stared at me, as if I were speaking another language. That's a lie, Maurice shouted, standing up from his chair. That's a lie. You are our father. Biologically, no, son. The test doesn't lie. Sterling, the one you call Uncle, who was always so present, is your biological father. He and your mother betrayed me for more than 40 years. All of you are the fruit of that betrayal. Ruthie screamed, No, it's not true. Mom wouldn't do that. But I saw in her eyes that she knew it was true. Maybe she had always known deep down. Vincent returned from the bathroom, wiping his mouth, his eyes red. And Mom? She knows? She always knew? Do you think she didn't know whose children you were? She knew from the beginning and deceived me all these years. Franklin, who had always been the most controlled, the most centered, broke down. He started crying like a child. How? How did she do this to us? How did he do this? Uncle Sterling was like a second father to us. He was your father. Only no one told me. They stayed there with me for hours, crying, shouting, trying to process that bombshell. They, too, had been deceived. They had grown up believing that the dear uncle was just a family friend, when in reality he was their father. And they had grown up loving me as their father, when I was nothing more than a foolish engineer who paid the bills. But do you know what happened? After the dust settled, after they talked among themselves, after they cried all they had to cry, the 4 of them came to me together. And Franklin spoke in a firm voice. You are our father. It doesn't matter what those papers say. You were the one who raised us. You were the one who stayed up late when we were sick. You were the one who worked all your life to give us the best. You were the one who taught us to walk, to read, to be good people. Sterling is only biological, but you are our real father. I broke down. I fell into crying with them. My children had chosen me. Even knowing the truth, even knowing there was no common blood between us, they had chosen me. And that, in that moment of so much pain, was the only thing that kept me standing. They confronted their mother. It was ugly. Ruthie shouted at her. She called her a liar, a traitor. Maurice said he was never going to forgive her. Vincent couldn't even look at her. And Franklin coldly said she had destroyed the family, that she had destroyed everything. And then they went after Sterling. They knocked on his door. Mrs. Halloway opened it. They asked for her husband. She called him. When Sterling appeared, Franklin looked him in the eyes and said, "We know everything. We did the test. You are our biological father. But just so you know, we don't want you as a father. We choose Gerald. You, just the man who got our mother pregnant. Nothing more." Sterling tried to explain. He tried to say he loved them, that he always loved them. But they turned their backs on him and left. They left him there at the door crying, destroyed. Mrs. Halloway, who had heard everything, went into the house and exploded. She who had stayed quiet during all those years, swallowing the humiliation, watching her husband live a double life, finally screamed, "I always knew! 44 years. I knew, but now it's over. I want a divorce." She filed for separation that same week. She took the house, she took the pension, she took everything. Sterling was left with nothing. No wife, no children, no friend, only with guilt and shame. I also filed for divorce. There was no way to continue. 45 years of marriage based on a lie are worth nothing. My lawyer was good. He managed to prove marital fraud. Sonia got almost nothing. She ended up in a small rented apartment, living on a meager pension. The children barely speak to her. They visit her once in a while out of obligation. But the love, the respect, all of it is gone. I sold the house where we lived. I couldn't set foot in there without feeling sick. I bought a smaller, simpler apartment near Franklin. I started a new life, a real life, without lies. And the children continued to be my children. They come to visit me every Sunday. We eat together, we talk, we laugh. Ruthie brings the grandchildren. Vincent, after getting a donor kidney, is doing well in health. Maurice got married. Franklin was promoted at work. Life went on without Sterling, without Sonia, but with us, the real family. Sterling tried to approach his biological children a few times. He sent messages, he called, he asked to talk. But they blocked him. They said he lost the right to be a father when he chose to be a lover and a traitor. He has 4 biological children in the world, but none of them want him. He died as a father before he died as a man. Sonia lives alone. The children fulfill the bare minimum. They call on her birthday, on Mother's Day, but it's protocol. There is no love. She lost her family when she chose betrayal. And I lost 44 years of my life to a lie. But I gained 4 real children. Children who chose me not because of blood, but because of love. And that, in the end, is worth more than any DNA. Today, when I look back at everything that happened, I see things in a different way. The pain is still here. I won't lie. 44 years of betrayal don't get erased from memory. Every time I remember the years I spent traveling, working like a madman, believing I was building a family, and then finding out I was actually paying the bills for another man's children, my chest tightens. But at the same time, I learned something. that might be the most important lesson of my entire life. A father isn't the one who makes the child. A father is the one who raises them. Who wakes up in the middle of the night when the child has a fever? Who teaches them to walk, to ride a bike, to be a good person? Who works hard to put food on the table, clothes on their back, a roof over their head? Who gives advice? Who disciplines when necessary? Who hugs when things are hard? Who is present? That is being a father. The rest is just biology. Sterling may have the blood of my 4 children running in his veins, but he was never a father. He was just a man who got my wife pregnant 4 times. A man who hid behind my friendship to live a lie. He had the easy part, the good part, showing up to play, to laugh, to be the cool uncle. I had the hard part. I had to work, support, educate, and discipline. And in the end, when the truth came to light, my children chose me. They chose the one who stayed. They chose the one who loved for real. Some people ask me if I regret raising them, if I regret working so hard for children who weren't mine. And the answer is no. I don't regret a single second, because those 40-something years weren't lost. They were years of true love. Love that I gave and love that I received. What was a lie was the marriage. What was a lie was the friendship with Sterling. But the love for my children was always real, and their love for me is too. Sonia lost everything. She had everything in her hand: a hardworking, faithful husband who loved her, 4 wonderful children, a good house, comfort, security. But she wanted more. She wanted the thrill of betrayal. She wanted the lover and the husband at the same time. And in the end, she was left with neither. Sterling didn't want to stay with her after everything came to light, and I, of course, sent her away. She reaped exactly what she sowed: solitude. Sterling also reaped what he sowed. He lost his wife, Mrs. Halloway, a woman who had stayed quiet through the humiliation for decades. He lost his best friend, which was me. He lost his biological children, who rejected him. And he lost his dignity. Today he lives alone, bitter, carrying the weight of guilt. He has 4 living children, but it's as if he has none, because none of them want to know anything about him. He died as a father while still breathing as a man. And I lost many things. I lost the illusion of a happy marriage. I lost a friend I thought was a brother. I lost the peace of mind that comes from trusting people. But I gained something that is worth more than all of that. I gained the certainty that true love exists. The love of my children for me and mine for them is real. It is stronger than any DNA. It is stronger than any lie. Last Sunday they came here to my house to eat, the 4 of them with the sons-in-law, the daughter-in-law, and the grandchildren. We had a barbecue in the yard. We drank those ice-cold beers. The grandchildren played. We talked. We laughed. It was a perfect day, a day of real family. And when they left, each one gave me a tight hug and said, "I love you, Dad." And I know it's true, not out of obligation, not because of blood, but by choice. Life taught me that family isn't about surnames. It's not about birth certificates. It's not about DNA. Family is about who stays, who chooses to stay when it would be easier to leave, who loves even when they discover there is no blood tie. My children could have turned their backs on me. They could have said I was nothing to them. but they chose me. And that choice is worth more than any biological tie. If this story of betrayal, of choice, and of true love touched your heart the way it touched mine, leave that like to cheer up this old heart. Subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss the next stories I'll tell with all my love. And tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there now. Have you gone through a betrayal that changed your life? Did you have to forgive someone? Or were you forgiven after a big mistake? This old man is very happy to know who is on the other side listening to me and what part of your day you set aside to hear me out. A big, tight hug, as big as my heart. I could have stayed bitter. I could have surrendered to hatred and resentment. I could have cut ties with everyone and died alone, but I chose differently. I chose to stay with those who chose me. I chose to love those who loved me for real. And I chose to keep going because life didn't end just because a lie was revealed. Life continues. And I continue being a father, the father of 4 wonderful children who don't have my blood, but have all of my heart. The lab called and said I wasn't the father of any of my 4 children, that they were all from another man, my best friend. But you know one thing? The lab can prove DNA. It can prove biology, but it cannot prove love. It cannot measure dedication. It cannot weigh sacrifice. And in those things, the things that truly matter, I am the Father. I always was and I always will be. And in the end, I won because the traitors were left alone, old and abandoned. And I was left with a family that loves me for real. A family that chose me. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch next.